What is the volatility contraction pattern or VCP pattern? If you guys have searched and found this video, you probably know what the volatility contraction pattern is already. Basically, the VCP pattern is one of Mark Minervini's trading strategy that he uses and practices regularly and which has generated him substantial returns in the stock market. And for all of you guys who have stumbled across this video and this is the first time that you are hearing of the volatility contraction pattern, the main role of the VCP pattern is to help investors and traders alike to establish a precise entry point so as to increase your probability of success in the stock market. And if this is your first time hearing who Mark Minervini is one of the stock market wizards featured in Jack Schwager's best-selling book, Market Wizards. Mark Minervini is a legend in trading circles because of his ability to consistently generate substantial returns in the stock market. In fact, he managed to turn his personal account from a few $1,000s to a couple of millions of dollars. So in today's video, I'll be talking about the VCP pattern, which is one of Mark Minervini's trading system, its characteristics, how to identify the volatility contraction pattern, and how to use the VCP pattern in the stock market. What is the VCP pattern? The VCP pattern is one of Mark Minervini's trading strategy, which he uses to identify specific stock entry points. These entry points will give investors and traders a higher probability of success, because at these points, the reward outweighs the risk. So at these specific stock entry points in the VCP pattern, the risk to reward ratio is favorable. And stocks which are under accumulation will display the characteristics of this VCP pattern. Accumulation is the transfer of shares from weak hands to strong hands. In other words, during accumulation, most retail investors are selling while institutions are buying. And accumulation typically takes place when prices are moving sideways or in a consolidation. Stocks which are being accumulated will display these VCP pattern characteristics. And because the institutions are accumulating shares during the VCP pattern, the VCP pattern helps establish a precise entry point for high probability of success. Stock price on price charts reveal the activities of market participants, so the actions that market participants take in the stock market do leave behind clues on the price charts. However, we only want to pay attention to clues left behind by big players such as the institutions, because this is where the smart money is. And the VCP pattern helps us identify the characteristics and clues left behind by the institutions. We only want to follow the footprints of people who know the direction out of the desert. The same thing is true in the stock market. We want to follow the direction in which the institutions are moving towards to, and the stocks that they are accumulating. Stocks which are being accumulated by the institutions will display these VCP pattern characteristics. So what are these VCP pattern characteristics? The first characteristic of a VCP pattern is that price volatility contracts from the left towards the right. So we want to look for price volatility to contract from the left side of the base to the right side of the base. And the reason why we want to see volatility contracting is because if the stock is being accumulated by smart money or the institutions, the available supply of the stock will be absorbed by the appetite of these big players. And as the supply becomes more scarce, volatility will decrease as price moves from the left side of the base to the right side of the base. And in a VCP pattern, there are typically 2 to 6 corrections. And each price contraction should be lower than the previous contraction. So if the initial price contraction from high to low is 25%, then the next price contraction should be less than 25%. From the high here to the low over here, the price contraction is around 25%. Then from the high to the low of the next contraction, it should be less than 25%. Let's take a look at an example of price volatility contracting from the left side to the right side. For this price chart, notice how the price contraction is lesser than the previous price contraction. So for this price contraction here, it's lesser than this price contraction here. And for this price contraction here, it is lesser than this price contraction over here. You can see that from the left side to the right side, the price volatility is contracting. And that is the first characteristic of the VCP pattern. We want to see price volatility contracting from the left side of the base to the right side of the base. The second volatility contraction pattern characteristic is that we want to see volume contract significantly from the left side to the right side. So at the left side of the base, volume is relatively higher than at the right side of the base. And we ideally want to see volume dries up at or near the lowest levels of the base. And with each price contraction, the price of the stock gets tighter and the volume lowers. So why do we want to see both price and volume volatility contracting from the left side to the right side? Because if the stock's price and volume don't taper down on the right side of the base, it means that supply is still coming into the market, which means it might take some more time for the stock to be properly accumulated. And thus, the buying should be put on hold. This is an example of a stock displaying a VCP pattern that Mark Minervini gave in his book. So the first characteristic that we want to take a look at is the price volatility. We want to see price volatility decreasing from the left side of the base to the right side of the base. Over here, the first price contraction is 27% from high to low. And for the second contraction from the high to the low, the price contraction is 17%, which is lower than the 27% in the first price contraction. And for the third price contraction, the contraction is 8%, which is lower than the second price contraction of 17%. So this meets the first characteristic of the VCP pattern, which is we want to see price volatility contracting from the left side of the base to the right side of the base. And for the second characteristic for the volatility contraction pattern, we want to see volume decreasing from the left side of the base to the right side. And we see that over here for this stock. For this stock, we see volume contracting from the left side of the base to the right side of the base. So this is an example of a stock which is being accumulated and which displays the VCP pattern. The third VCP pattern characteristic is that the stock must be on an uptrend. We want the stock to be on a confirmed uptrend. And we want to see this period of consolidation coming after this confirmed uptrend. So when a stock is being accumulated, it typically moves sideways or in a consolidation. And that is why we want to look out for a period of consolidation on our price charts. And another point to take note is that in this uptrend, the stock may have already moved up by 30%, 40% or even more. This is the price chart for Tesla, and on the right side we see that this is a period of consolidation. And before this period of consolidation, we see that prices were on an uptrend. This period of consolidation by Tesla meets the third characteristic of the VCP pattern, which is that the stock must be on an uptrend before the period of consolidation. Now that we know the characteristics of a VCP pattern, the next question is when do we enter our buy positions? We want to enter our buy positions at the pivot point. The pivot point is the optimal point to enter our position in the markets because that is where the risk to reward ratio is most favorable and the probability of success the highest. So we want to buy as close to the pivot point as possible without chasing the stock up by more than a few percentage points. The pivot point is also where the available supply of the stock is low and where even a small demand can move the stock higher. One of the main pivot point characteristics is the volume at the pivot. At the pivot, we want to see a contraction of volume often to a level well below the average. And the significant contraction in volume should also ideally correspond to the tighter section of the consolidation or the base. Let's take a look at an example of a pivot point. This is the price chart for Tesla, and we can see that over here Tesla is displaying the VCP pattern characteristics. The first characteristic is that price is contracting from the left side of the base to the right side of the base. This is the first contraction, then this is the second contraction, and this is the third contraction. So you can see that for each subsequent price contraction, the price volatility is always lower than the preceding price contraction. That is the first characteristic of the VCP pattern. The second characteristic that we want to see in a VCP pattern is volume contracting from the left side of the chart to the right side of the chart. And over here we can see that volume is generally decreasing from the left side of the chart to the right side of the chart. And that is the second characteristic of the VCP pattern. The third characteristic for the VCP pattern is that the stock must be on an uptrend. And as we have seen in the earlier example, Tesla was in a confirmed uptrend before this period of consolidation. So it also fulfills the third characteristic for the volatility contraction pattern. And now that we have determined that Tesla is displaying the VCP pattern and it's also under accumulation, the next thing that we want to find out is the pivot point. The pivot point is typically at the area of the price chart where prices are at the tightest. So over here we see that prices are in a very tight range. And the second thing that we want to take a look out for in a pivot point is that the volume is significantly below the average. And this tighter section of the price consolidation also corresponds to below average volume. So if we are looking to enter our position in Tesla, this will be the pivot point and an ideal place to enter our buy position. To recap, these are the three VCP pattern characteristics. The first is that the price volatility contracts from the left side of the chart to the right side of the chart. And the second characteristic is that we want to see volume also contracting from the left side of the chart to the right side of the chart. And the third characteristic for the volatility contraction pattern is that the stock must be on a confirmed uptrend before its period of consolidation. So this is Mark Minivini's trading strategy, the VCP pattern. Hopefully you guys have learned something from today's video. If you did, smash that like button because it will really help the channel grow and allow me to produce more content such as this. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to my channel because each week I release one new video about investing, trading and the stock market. I'll see you in those other videos. To your financial success.